Okay, we will now move on to our Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind. Superintendent, would you like to come up? And I don't know what staff you want to bring up as well. Carl, it looks like you're going to just have to sit behind that.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Director of Public Affairs, Jeff Van Holten, is helping you. So now we get to see you. So we're going to go on to 3.1, and we'll go to Carl Empey. I think, are you doing a review of this, Carl?
Actually, good morning, Madam Chair and Mr. Chairman, board members. It's a pleasure to be here. The first item is we received a letter from your child nutrition program staff saying we could no longer do subsidized meals for our adult patrons. As you reviewed our fee chart a couple months ago, we had a $2.25 meal ticket fee. The actual cost is around $4. So we want and proposing to increase that fee to $4 so we cover the cost of the meal. The kids still will get the free breakfast and lunch. This is just for our teachers, our educators, and our staff. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions for this, and/or I would be seeking a motion? I see you, Carol, doing something. I'll be patient.
There we go.
Board Member Lear?
Thank you. I'm aware that that's the practice for child nutrition, that adults pay the full freight. I just want to make sure that the playing field is level. Do you know, did you do any checking to see if that's true in all LEAs who work with the child nutrition and federal lunch program? Do you know if that's true?
That's a really good question, and we didn't reach out to other LEAs. We just did the analysis of what it costs us per meal internally.
And if I can follow up just briefly.
Do you want someone from child nutrition to come and answer that, Board Member Lear?
Not necessarily. I don't want
Okay,
to take
all
this,
right.
I don't want to
Okay,
take that
go
much
ahead.
time, but I do have a short,
Go ahead.
just a short follow-up. I just would like to make sure, it's been a while since I've paid for those meals in schools. I just want to make sure, we don't need to have that discussion right now, but I want to be sure that that's the practice in all LEAs, if that's the practice being applied to you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Okay, I would, Board Member Hutchins.
Just a point of information and then probably a question. Are we being asked to approve the fee schedule?
Yeah, they're increased from the 250 up to the 4.
Okay, that specifically?
Yes.
Okay, no question.
I'd be seeking a motion. Chair Huntsman?
Yes, I'd like to propose that the board approve make a motion that the board approve the one-time change in the school lunch fee on our fee schedule as proposed.
We have a second by Board Member Davis, Vice Chair Davis. So the motion before the board is that the board approve the one change on the fee schedule for lunch fees. Would that be accurate?
Yes, increasing it to $4.
Yes, to the $4 fee. Any more discussion? Board Member Lear?
Sorry, and I cut off this opportunity and I didn't follow the fact that there'd be a motion. I would like to know then if that's the practice in all LEAs, because I'm not comfortable imposing this on USDB if it's not the standard practice.
So, for clarity, so you're wondering if that's what's happening in other schools, if they're
That's
paying the
right.
$250, or if,
They're paying $4 or they're paying whatever and
whatever.
it seems like the cost should be the same if it's a national school lunch program.
okay, do we have someone from our school lunch program here with us? Or can we get someone from there?
Can we maybe delay the vote? Is that?
So can I
Then you'd have to
ask a
table.
question?
Yes.
So is the question that's before you, and you're trying to get staff, is the question is the movement from the 250 to the 4, or is the question is $4 the normal?
I think Carol,
Fee,
if
because
I'm
it-
correct, Carol can correct me, but is this what is happening across the state for other adults in schools? And is the cost the same? Are others being charged $5 or are they being charged $250, or is this the most accurate
Okay,
amount?
I just
Yeah.
wanted,
Is that right, Carol?
That's right. I just want to
Okay,
make sure
thank you.
it's being consistently enforced statewide.
Thank you. Can we table this until we get somebody here?
you can, because you have a motion on the table,
Yeah,
you
we
can
have.
post, a motion to, I'll make the motion to postpone until staff gets here to answer the question.
Okay, do I have a second to that?
I'll second it.
Second, Board Member Lear or Booth. All in favor of postponing, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, it's postponed for now, and we'll pick it back up in a few minutes. Okay, so let's go on to 3.2, the Special Education Policy and Procedure Manual. Superintendent, are you speaking to that, or is Michelle or Susan? Who's speaking to this 3.2?
Aye.
Okay, so
We'll do it.
Assistant Superintendent of the Deaf, Michelle Tanner, will speak to us.
Okay. So the Special Education Policy and Procedure Manual is developed, a template is developed by the State Board Office of Education, and they prepare some new rules that we have to comply with, and each district has to submit their special education manual to their board for review and for consideration. If you look through the special education manual, you'll see we followed that template as closely as possible. However, USDB is slightly different than the other districts. For example, we have no child find responsibilities. Child find is the responsibility of the district. The districts then calls a meeting in which we are invited to attend that meeting, and then we present what services we offer to deaf and blind and visually impaired students. And so there are some things that are slightly different in our special education manual. We reference in there our technical assistance manual, which is given to districts to help them know how to operate with the schools for the deaf and the blind. And some of the content that's related to that is also listed in there. We complied in there with anything that was necessary in the special education manual that, for example, it gives, you have to say that you're going to comply with statute, which of course we said we would. So things are in there. We followed the template for those of you who are interested. And then we also added some things that are very specific to the schools for the deaf and the blind. For example, when you call us, what students we serve is different than what other students serve. So we're presenting that to you for your consideration and approval.
Do I have any questions? Board Member Hanson?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Just a quick one on the child find. I know that the kids at USDB have been identified as having a disability, either blind or deaf. But do we have a responsibility to look for other disabilities or kids who are in need of additional help?
This is Susan Patton, and no, we don't. We also, one of the things that we changed or added to in the manual, the policy manual itself, was for the initial evaluation. So school districts and early intervention agencies, but school districts are responsible for that initial evaluation for special education. So, and then we get the referral from them. So we don't evaluate additional disabilities. However, when they do come to us after that initial evaluation and then a placement is decided by the IEP team, of course, we're assessing on those disabilities as well when they do come to us. But as far as initial evaluation and what those disabilities are, the special education classification, that's not up to us to begin with. Did that answer your question?
I
In a
think so. Just
roundabout
one
way?
quick
Go ahead.
follow-up. So do all the kids who are on-campus students at USDB, are those all referrals from districts? Or
Yes.
can they self-refer to
No,
USDB?
There's only one instance in which a student can come to the schools for the deaf and the blind where we host the meeting instead of the district hosting the meeting. And even in that case, we invite the district.
Right.
But those are students who attended a school for the deaf placement out of state. So we're trying to mirror or match their placement from the other state. So in that case, we can call the meeting and get that started, so we don't delay any services for a student. It's already got that kind of placement already set aside.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you educating me. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Board Member Lear?
Thanks. You said you followed a template that provided by the USBE special education folks. I also wondered if, because I confess to not reading every word of this.
It was 110 pages, so we know.
we know, yeah.
So I want to make sure you conferred regularly with Dr. Voorhees and her staff, and that was a joint effort so that the changes you made or the adjustments you made would still be consistent with IDEA. Is that, can you assure me that?
We attended their trainings and meetings for guidance on how this, they had several of them. They were great about them. I don't think we had there wasn't anything that was like we struggled with that we had to call them back and get questions on. It was the same things we've always had and done.
Okay.
And I will say that all of these issues we have consulted with Leah Voorhees as far as she's understanding our makeup and how we do things as well. So she is understanding of those. We didn't specifically consult with her for these individual things, but as Michelle said, we did attend the trainings to make sure that we were on the right track. So anyway, does that?
It does, and then if it's okay, I have another follow-up to Board Member Hanson's question.
Yes, Board Member Lear.
He didn't ask that question. I thought he'd keep going. I think what I wanted to know is, once the students are identified by an LEA and then come to you, I wanted to know if then you do have responsibility, because now you're the one that serves that student. Then if there is an additional 504 issue, there's an additional, then you would have responsibility to identify that and act on that. Is that right?
That's true.
Absolutely.
We become the designated LEA. Once they place with us, we're called the
Okay.
designated LEA, and then we assume all those responsibilities. So we have students that have multiple disabilities. They
Right.
have a hearing loss and they have autism or
Right.
whatever, and obviously deaf and blind, but.
Thanks. That's all I wanted to make sure. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I would be seeking a motion then. Board Member Booth?
I have a motion that the board approve the updates to the special education policy and procedure manual as it has been presented to us.
Thank you. I'd be seeking a second.
Second.
Board Member Straight. The motion before the board is that the board approve the updates to the special education policy procedure manual as presented. Oh, yeah. Do you want to speak to your motion?
No, I'm
Oh, I
fine,
always
thank you.
forget that. Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Okay, we'll go on to, let's go back to 3.1.
Do you need a motion to bring it back?
Brian, do you have something?
Yes, Vice Chair, I was going to say that Kathleen Britton is in the house. She's here and available for the first item that was tabled,
Okay.
if you want to bring that back.
Okay, so she's in the house? So, pardon? I'd be seeking a motion to bring back 3.1.
So move.
Okay, so moved by Board Member Cannon, second by Chair Huntsman. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll be going back to 3.1 concerning the child nutrition program. And did you, yeah, there is a motion on the table that the board approve the change to the school lunch fees for the USDB. Did you hear the conversation?
I did not.
Okay, the question, and I'll repeat, does somebody have, whose mic? There's two mics, maybe, yeah, maybe that's, but I've got you, Chris, and I'll come back to you. Okay, the question was about the fee that they're going to increase. They were charging $250, and that you helped them, supported them, saying you have to charge the full amount for the adults in the building. Is that the same amount that is happening throughout the state if an adult wants to purchase a lunch at a school, or is that a different amount than $4? Will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Kathleen Britton, Child Nutrition Programs Director at USBE.
Federal funds cannot be used to subsidize adult meals. And adult meal pricing has to be equivalent to what they receive for a meal, at least for a paid lunch. So this year, it's a lot higher. It's $3.56, I think they're getting, because all meals are free. We ask that the meal price for an adult covers the full cost of the meal. They cannot use their federal funds to subsidize the price for an adult meal. And that goes across all school districts and charters.
So they could charge more than that?
Yes. If that's to cover their price of that meal, they have to cover the price. They cannot use their federal dollars to cover the other price of the meal. So say the meal costs $4 to prepare. They cannot charge an adult $2.50.
And do you know this is what Board Member Lear was asking, is this what's happening across the state for adult meals? Is it $4? Is it $6? Or it depends on where you live?
It depends on the district
Okay.
of where they are at.
Okay, so do you find that $4 to be illogical?
Correct, yes.
Not illogical, logical?
Logical.
Okay. Board Member Norton?
Yes, I just had a question. It appears that we are changing the student fees schedule for this, but this is about adult lunches. Why would that be a change of a student fee?
Go ahead, Carl.
I'd be happy to speak to that, Board Member Norton. The fee schedule that we brought a couple of months ago includes all fees, student fees and non-student fees. The state legislature has us bring to you, our governing board, any fee that we propose to charge to get your review and a vote in favor of. And for purposes of discussions like this very item, to make sure it's vetted out. The fee itself, the $4 that we're doing, we're proposing to charge up to, but not including that $4. So as Kathleen has mentioned, our costs are about $3.70, but with food prices going up as fast as they are, we wanted to make sure we had enough headroom at the $4 to cover the school year.
Can I ask a follow-up?
You bet.
Do you have adult students
We
using your lunch?
we have the responsibility to educate them up to age 22.
Would that be a fee under the children's pricing?
Yes,
though?
it'd be
Okay.
the $2 or the actual, well, it's a free and reduced
Yes.
lunch price breakfast.
Yeah. Are you okay, Kristen? Okay, are there any other questions? Then the motion before the board is that the board approves the one change to the lunch fees for the adults, up to $4. Any more discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, so we can move on to 3.3, which is an information item. So we'll go back to Carl, the Finance Director, for the monthly budget update.
Okay, thank you. The financial report that we're presenting this morning is for the first 3 months that ended September 30th. We are financially solvent, and the year we're off to a good start. Our inflows, or the transfers is essentially from the state, were just under $11.3 million for the first 3 months. Our expenditures were about $8.6 million. So we had more inflows than we did outflows by about $2.7 million. So we're in a good financial position right now. The number of students served is 2,490 for the month of October. Our land grant enrichment fund balance is approximately $931,000. Our donated fund is approximately $272,000, and our foundation balance is $1.2 million and change. The chart behind that is the budget status report that goes through all the granular detail, the numbers that I just summarized. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have just on our financial condition.
Are there any questions for Director Empey? Seeing none, we'll move on to 5.4, which is the FY 2021 USDB Annual Report. This would be Assistant Superintendent Susan Patton and Assistant Superintendent Michelle Tanner.
Right there. All right, we had a discussion briefly about this. We postponed it to this month, so we'll run through it still quickly because I know your time is precious. So this is the annual report of last year from 2020 to 2021, and the total number of students that we provided services to statewide in different capacities. So we have, you can see that the largest bulk was audiology services. We have the next largest trunk are PIP and outreach services, and the total was 5,236. We have, we've broken this pie, we've sliced the pie several different ways. So over here to your left, this shows you whether they were served in earlier intervention, outreach, or in one of our classrooms. And again, you can see that 48% is provided in our early intervention programs, 36% across the state of Utah, and then 16% are in our classrooms. Those are the students that require the most intensive services. So if you go into our classrooms and you look and take that 16% and divide it up, you can see where all the students are located. We have 117 at JMS, all the way down to where we had in the Blind South 9 students, different students at different locations across the state and in different campuses. You can see that our campus in St. George has expanded considerably. It's up to 54 students, and that's pretty quick. Deaf and blind students served SEF-wide. You can see across the state, this is whether they're in classrooms or in an outreach program, kind of how the pie is sliced where students are residing. And if you want a breakdown of what that means, you can see that off to the right, how blue is for the blind school and yellow is for the deaf school, and the grand total is on the right-hand side. And I will just keep moving on. I'm going to slide down. I'm just going to highlight the graphs to help with the graphs, and you can read the text if you are inclined to do so. Often, this is about the School for the Deaf specifically. Often at the School for the Deaf, they ask us how many students are using spoken language, how many students are using American Sign Language. So since that question is regularly asked, we have data reflected in the report. So if you're in the outreach, the students across the entire state, you'll see most of the students across the entire state outside of a campus program uses spoken language, and we provide a lot of interventions with their hearing aids and audiological services and SLPs, things like that. There are students that use both languages. I don't know of any student that doesn't use some English. So they use also American Sign Language, that's 23%. However, if you look at our campus programs, that dynamic shifts, and you'll see that 70% of the students are using American Sign Language. That is in reference to the fact that they like to hang around other kids that speak their same language. And it's very isolating if you speak one language and everybody else around you speaks another language. So it's a much more freeing environment to talk with other people, talk to your teacher directly in those environments. And that's why you see the shift. So the students with sign language are primarily on campus, and then the spoken language, the 30%, most of those are the younger kids. Those are kids who are providing an intervention and then eventually go out to an outreach program.
Yes, we have a question.
Yes.
Board Member Hymas?
Yes.
Thank you. Can I just ask, I'm looking at this and it's in opposition, right, on campus. Spoken language is what they would probably use more. I get that it's freeing, and I support that 100%. Is it to prepare them for the future, would it be better to push spoken language? Right? What happens when they leave USDB and they no longer have this other option?
When they leave us, they have solid intact language, and they also have a strong acceptance of who they are. In fact, we'll be presenting with you a portrait of a graduate sometime soon. But it's very important to accept, a lot of these students are not going to ever be able to speak. It's an exercise in futility to speak those words. It's just not going to happen. We need to give them special instruction on how to actually learn how to read and write with people. And it's very different than, say, how we learned how to read and write. And so our teachers are experts on how to translate it from written English to ASL and from ASL to written English. And the kids, we find, the kids that can shift and go back and forth between those two languages are much more successful than the students who struggle. If you go throughout life and you think you're getting some of what it, and you're kind of getting it, and you never get a solid intact language, you are fighting a battle the rest of your life in which you will never catch up. And you are struggling to understand the world and environment around you. So we give them a way to do both. A lot of kids like both. And then there's some kids who can't, who just can't do both. It's just not going to work for them. And that's okay. We just love the kids however they come to us, and we just accelerate whatever they can accelerate upon and help those that have, when they're weak areas, and strengthen up their knowledge.
Follow up?
A quick follow-up. It's an assumption, but I'm assuming that you get more of the on-campus, you get more of the kids who struggle with the spoken language on campus,
Yes.
those who would naturally.
Yep, and well, and the other thing is they may also want to be around peers, like peers. So that's the other reason. So we'll get kids that it's not working for them, spoken language, it's not working for them out in the other environment. It gets, even for a child that has just a hard of hearing, has some minor hearing loss, in a room like this, right here where we're sitting, is extremely difficult for them. Because, and well, you guys do a great job of waiting and taking turns, but not everybody does that. And so what happens is we talk over one another, and the hard of hearing child is catching what this person's saying, that the conversation is now shifted to their left. They don't even know where to locate sound, and then they give up, and then it's hard to even participate in that discussion. So an interpreter is really important for them. So some of those students even want sign language.
One last question, please.
Go ahead, Board
Just-
Member Hyben.
So you're telling me, and this was my overall question, maybe I should have started with that. There's no disadvantage, both sets of kids, on campus, off campus, we are taking care of their needs in a way that they have an advantage, they both have equal advantage coming out of the system.
Yep, they both have what they need, and some have more needs with spoken language, some have more needs with American Sign Language. This battle there has been, in whether you give a child sign language or do spoken English, has existed for hundreds of years. We have worked very hard at USDB to not make it about the battle. We've worked very hard to make it about what's best for the child. And for some kids, spoken language is the way to go. It works for them. It works really well for them. And then the other kids, that doesn't work at all for them. And then there's most of the kids who actually benefit from access to both. And then when they're in a spoken language environment, they do their very best. And then when they where they want to feel good about and accepted who they are, they hang around with the deaf community and they communicate with other people who understand their culture.
Thank you. Thank you.
You good? Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you for those questions. It is the field of deaf education.
Hold on just a minute, we have one more question.
Sure.
Board Member Cannon?
Well, I'm perseverating back on audiological services, which are you do more than anything else. And when you mentioned it, it brought to my mind reading that the current administration at the federal level was considering providing Medicare, Medicaid coverage for hearing aids and audiological devices. And it makes me wonder, what kind of coverage do your students get through the government or insurance sources to cover their hearing needs? Would you comment on that?
Yeah.
Because you're doing a lot of these audiological services. I'm just wondering if there's help for people.
Yep, and the services we provide is their educational audiology, so they can access their environment. So we're very specific to that. However, I'm aware of what a lot of our students are getting, and hearing aids have not been covered. I've always wondered that through my entire career, why they would cover a surgery for a cochlear implant, but yet won't cover the needs for a hearing aid, because a hearing aid, it can be pretty pricey, and every once in a while, as children do, they're like, I'm gonna flush that down the toilet. And that's a real frustrating thing for a parent to try to pay for. We often, to help them with that, since we know that they can't, we loan them hearing aids. And that's our audiologist will go out and make sure that they can have those hearing aids. Depending on the child's IEP, sometimes they'll stay just during the day. Sometimes they go home, depending what they need for FAPE.
And do you get federal funds to cover the costs of those? No, you just build that into your budget to provide for the kids.
Yeah, we have our audiologists who go out and make sure they're getting the right hearing aid, right FM system, the right services to make sure their cochlear implants working correctly. I mean, we do a lot of that. We even often screen to find them, to find children. It's like the district will call us and they have a child that they're wondering about. We'll go in and assist. But But yeah, we get donations from people to help support that. The USDB Foundation has been helping support a lot of those purchases that we need to make. We hold on to those loan amounts so we don't lose inventory. But if they need them, we want them to have them, because if they can't hear them, they can't participate in society at large.
Well, and just one other comment, I thought, well, it's nice for the federal government to think about covering hearing aids for people who are old and losing their hearing. But my goodness, what about these little kids that are so struggling? That would be, I'm old, and I probably will need hearing aids, but, the idea of providing hearing aids that a little child desperately needs would take priority for me, so.
Absolutely, because you've learned your language. You have a solid, intact language in which to base all your mental cognition off of, and our children are just barely getting it. It's so critical. Our PIP program is critical that we get into those kids as soon as possible. And we do. We provide loaner hearing aids. If they're going through that hardship, we make sure they get hearing aids as soon as possible, because that is so important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Cannon. Go ahead, please.
All right, another question I often get on the deaf side is because we've had, I mentioned a moment ago that we worked really hard to get rid of this barrier that it's an either or decision. You either use sign language or you use spoken language. And we don't believe it's an either or in this world and in this for the children. And so we've had both programs under USDB, and they used to be what people referred to as the WISE system. You went to LSL or you went to ASL English. And then early on, we realized that it doesn't have to be that way. We have both of these programs on campus. They can shift back and forth between this classroom and this classroom, and we have experts on this side and experts on this side. All we need to do is get the adults to play nice in the sandbox. So we worked really hard, and I am really proud of what we've accomplished. We have a large number of students. These are specifically in our preschool programs. These are what parents are choosing to do when they come into our preschool programs, now that we've offered them everything and said you don't have to pick one or the other. Some are still choosing to just do spoken language. That's what you see on the blue. The yellow is those who are choosing to go back and forth between both programs. And then in the beginning, the 13% of them are choosing to do just sign language. They don't want to have the speech interventions services. So you'll see most parents are picking, they want to go back and forth. They would like to have both. And the kids that you're seeing more LSR are the students that are more hard of hearing. They don't have a lot to intervene upon. So that's why you see those numbers. And we get those students, they end up going back to district. So we also at USDB provide all the interpreting services for schools across the state. That's in every school, that is available to every school district, every online, in person, remotely. Anyway, so we just showing you where those are at. Most of those are in the Salt Lake City area, 66% of those, and then you see northern Utah, and then we have some in southern Utah. And that's depending, and some of those are online, some of those are in person, all that kind of jazz. Here's the breakdown of the audiology services, just so you know the kind of services that we are providing out there. So we have kids that we just do here. You can see the bulk is we're evaluating hearing of students across the state of Utah, down to where we're placing hearing assistive devices in the classroom. These kids, they'll wear something over their neck, the teacher wears something over the neck, and it's a personal FM that also connects into their hearing aids. And then the ones in the orange, those are the students we see almost, like those are on our campus programs typically, or even on a self-contained class. We go visit them regularly and make sure that they're having services. To measure vocabulary growth, that's very important at the School for the Deaf. It's really hard to do language growth on deaf children. There aren't standardized assessments for that. We do language samples, we do language assessments, but they're individualized. It's hard to put in and each one of them has a different area of language concern in which we're addressing. So we measure the vocabulary. It's the easiest measure to present here. If you look at the bars, if our students were only making 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, you would see nothing. It would be just a zero line all across. But you can see, according to the graph, we have made significant gains beyond that. The blue is for spoken language. You can see it goes up to third grade. That's because at third grade, those students are transitioning out into their mainstream programs. And then our sign language students stay across. And so this is their growth for each grade level from last year. And the overall change is at the very end. The blue are the children that only use spoken language. So they stay with us until about third grade. We have a few that stay till third grade, not as many. And then they transition out to their mainstream programs. Or if they need more sign language, they stick with us in our sign language program. So that's why you see the green. Those are the students who use American Sign Language.
Okay, we have another question. Board Member Hanson?
Thank you. I just wondered, looking at the graph, if we have any ideas about the big dip for 5th and 6th grade there
Yeah.
compared to 7th, 8th. It looks like we stall out and then we really pick up. Any ideas?
I can tell you, so with all of the students, all these numbers that you're seeing here, you've got very small numbers. They are going to be less than 50. You really need to interpret any data on students with extreme caution that are less than 100, because what happens is one student struggles, the number drops significantly, or one student excels, which is probably what's happening in 8th grade, is one of the students did amazingly well. It pulls all the scores up. And so it's really hard to really give you a graph that shows a great picture, but we are working with very small numbers. And so those shifts are greater in the graphs.
Just quick follow-up then,
Go
I
ahead.
guess. So we're saying that for all our campuses, the end size for this would be less than 50 or less? Is that
Well,
right?
each grade level
Is that-
can be between about 20, at least 20 use it. Some of these, like, I'm guessing 5th and 6th, because I had to look back on the data, but they may be one that is 10, that's a smaller number. I mean,
Okay.
like, because we shift, and like, there's a larger number of students, I do know there's a larger number of students in 10th and 11th grade right now. So they're, across all our campuses, probably about 30.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a way to include some end size information on there. I know that's not straightforward because the end size varies from class to class, but.
Yes, I did put at the top I did put it in here at the top, that you really need to be very cautious when you see any of the data for any of the numbers, because we can't report our end scores because we publicly can't announce. You could figure out which kid is which if we did that, if we gave all that kind of detail. We used to do line graphs, but it was just too telling. You could tell which student was which.
Yeah.
So we're trying to maintain confidentiality and at the same time give you a report that you can see the progress.
I appreciate the challenge to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Board Member Hymas?
I understand this is an annual report. Do you have data for years past that would show a more consistent?
Longitudinal?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this does include some of these with some of the kids too. I mean, some of them been here a little bit longer and it's showing some of their standard score growth. But yes, we have this every year, this same graph every year. And we also just added an enhancement to our Power School, which is our student data system, that also is going to help us track this for a long time with ease in use and stop making it so difficult. So we can actually give all those longitudinal graphs, hopefully easier, is what I should say. It won't take so much going through every annual report for 7 years.
Good. Okay, go ahead.
This we give, as you can see, there it is. All of these results should be interpreted with caution. Results should be in respect to smaller numbers of less than 12 per grade level on this one, on this graph. This test is called the Measures of Academic Progress. It's done through NWA. It is a computer adaptive assessment. We choose this assessment because it is the most accessible to deaf and hard of hearing students. And most of the deaf schools across the nation are joining on to this. So now we're hoping to get norms that are not just norms against hearing kids, but norms against other deaf students. And so the more deaf schools that sign on with this, the better. You'll see the blue graph shows where our students performed, and the orange is actually where the national hearing students, typical hearing student, is performing. Again, this assessment was normed on hearing students. It was not normed on deaf students. It was not designed for deaf students. It's very rare to find one that is. In fact, that's why we're working with this. We're hoping to help create that across the nation. So here's our reading average. We're slightly below the average in reading, which is the area that most deaf students struggle with, reading and writing. And then we have math. So you can see our math scores on this computer adaptive assessment from last year. And language use is like grammar. So grammar, and we've got some, you can see we're just slightly delayed in all. And this one, over here, we haven't given this test to as many, and so you'll see that the points are a little bit a wider of a gap. And that could also be indicative of a different curriculum than what the national is doing for special science at that specific grade level. So those are our scores for academics for the deaf school. All right.
All right, so I'll move through things pretty briefly and give you some of the highlights for each of our division. I'll start with our parent-infant program for the School for the Blind. One thing that was very interesting this last year was that when we had when we started in June, when we were in June of 1st of 2020, we were only at about 200 students. By the end of last year, of June of 2021, we had increased to 453 students. So that was an increase of 253 students. The reason for that we are thinking, based on our just questioning families, was we dropped significantly because of the pandemic. We were extremely low on referrals. People were not referring to early intervention agencies, which were not referring to us. Families weren't referring to us, and then they had a lot of anxiety of the service model of us coming into the home. So we were trying to be very creative in meeting at parks outside or doing virtual visits. But I just wanted you to be aware of that. That's a significant increase that we have not seen before. So now we're trying to scramble to serve a significant amount of parent-infant program students who are blind, visually impaired, and deaf-blind. And then for our campus, it goes through and it talks about our virtual, the success we had virtually. And I will say, we were surprised that for children under the age of 3, that we could provide virtual lessons, and they were fairly successful, which made us change our model to part-time virtual, part-time in-home, face-to-face visits. So for our campus program, we are a lot lower in our campus program than the School for the Deaf. One of the differences between the School for the Deaf and the School for the Blind is that the School for the Blind's primary services are in the outreach program. So most of our kids are in their local school districts that we're providing outreach services to. Our campus program, we had 51 total students. So Board Member Hanson, that's going to be taken into consideration with this too, because we are even lower as far as our campus data is concerned. We had 27 girls and 21 boys with 3 peer models. We do a number of assessments for our campus program. We do an academic assessment or academic assessments, and we did find that in our academic assessments, we did improve. However, with our other ones, we did decrease, and I will explain some of the reasons why that. But I'm not going to lie, I was a little taken back when we got that data, and I thought we've got to make some changes here. Which again, I think we can look at it in a good way that challenges us to change what we need to change. I'm going to move down to our functional assessments, because that's where I want you to really look at as far as the decrease was concerned. I presented a couple months ago on our expanded core curriculum immersion program that we wanted to infuse throughout the day, similar to a language immersion program in different districts. This is the data that was driving that change. We found that with our functional assessments and with our expanded core curriculum assessments, our kids needed more. And we know that the reason why we're falling short this last year was because we weren't able to get out into the community. We weren't able to teach things that were in the home for our students in our Bridges, which is our high school and community readiness program, but also in our elementary age kids too. We didn't hold short-term programs face-to-face, and we saw that was a big issue for us. I think it's important that we all, when we're looking at data and we're looking at program change, that we're very honest with ourselves and say, this is an issue and we need to make sure that we're changing it. Like I said, the expanded core curriculum assessments, we did see a decrease in those, which again, the one thing that is really interesting here is the assistive technology, our assistive technology piece, we rose, we did very well. And one of the reasons for that was because of our virtual visits. Our assistive technology team was able to do things virtually, so we have incorporated that as well into more of the expanded core curriculum curriculum, just because that is a big part of it as well. But you'll see a decrease in the nine areas. So for our outreach program, which again is our big hitter, we served 377 students in 30 districts and 40 charter schools. Now that is inclusive of our orientation and mobility specialists and our teachers of the visually impaired. This is not inclusive of our 3% districts. This is our outreach districts that are lower than 3%. So that's a significant amount of students. We did see an increase in our Jerry Johns, which is our reading fluency. I don't know how to sign you in.
It's all good. It's all good. See if we can get it. Go ahead. Keep going.
So we did see an increase in our Jerry Johns overall assessment. And our large print went up 15.24%. Our functional Braille, which I was worried about because of, again, we were teaching Braille online. And if you can imagine how hard that would be, it's extremely difficult. But we did see an increase of 56.75%. And then our academic Braille, again, the functional Braille is not the Braille that we're doing grade level math on, that we're doing, algebra, geometry, science, all of those things. And if you can imagine, those are extremely hard to Braille and extremely hard to teach in Braille. So our functional Braille did increase to that significant amount, but our academic Braille would only increase 26%. That's not bad, though. We're not going to take that as that was an improvement. So we're grateful for that. And then in our
Wait, can I interrupt?
absolutely.
No.
Okay, so is this like the deaf school where this is really the rate of increase? So it's a decrease in the increase, but this line would be no increase?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And please feel free to reach out to me through email or any way if you have questions, because I know there's a lot of information here that we're going through fairly quickly. And again, this is one of those things like our policy special ed manual where it can be long and laborious. We hope it's not as laborious as the special ed manual, but please feel free to reach out at any time. Our Deafblind Services, one thing that's important to realize with Deafblind Services is, number one, we serve statewide in every single district. So we're in all of the districts, 3% districts, and also starting in early intervention from birth through age 3. There is also no standardized test for students and children who are deafblind. So it is very difficult to assess those students. We do what's called the communication matrix. And first of all, I just have to point out these kids. I mean, honestly, you can't look at these kids and not just smile. But we do the communication matrix. And this is a test or an assessment where we are questioning caregivers. That could be a teacher and parents or both. I want you to look at the 2019-20. We increased to a 5.7, which we're attributing that to the fact that we were doing those assessments, which we were not required to do that year, but I wanted to see a difference. And the reason why that was so high was because we were interviewing parents over the phone. So it's really not indicative of really what we think was happening with our students. This year, though, I think is very reflective of what was happening to with our students, and we did increase to a 3.5%. Does anybody have any questions on that? Because it's very, like I said, it's not a formal assessment or a standardized score. The other problem that we have with deafblindness is that we can only assess a certain amount of students. Those students who are participating in statewide assessments or in other academic assessments, we're not able to, we don't assess those because there are no deafblind assessments. So we go on what the districts have done and performed with their statewide assessments. These are students who are on a communication level that is like a conventional level and then and below. So there's 7 levels of communication where most of the time we're not assessing if they're on an abstract level, which is the same, level 7, which means they're putting words together. They're putting words together that could be with sign language. Tactile sign language is usually what they're doing. Or they're doing objects where they're putting together objects in a sequence, and that's a form of assessment. And if they have that cognitive ability, then the communication matrix usually is not what is most appropriate for them. So I just want to let you know how difficult it is for our students who are deaf and blind. The other thing that's difficult, I feel like I'm telling you all these problems, which we're very excited and happy what's happening in with our group, but our districts have a really hard time assessing because they can't get a reflective score if you can't hear and see. They can't perform or give that test in a way that's going to be accommodating for them to be able to get a reflective score. So that is our School for the Blind. And again, we had some really great things happening, but I think it also showed us where we needed to improve. And that was specifically because of the pandemic and our COVID issues that said we need to immerse ourselves in the expanded core curriculum throughout the school day. Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Thank you, Assistant Superintendents Tanner and Patton,
Okay.
for your reports. We will move on to Superintendent Coleman's report.
Thank you. And thank you to the associate superintendents. This report that we just flew through in about 20 minutes is the amount of work that they do to put this together and try to figure out what is most important for the legislature and the board and the public to know out of all the things that they do. And I really think it's a tremendous summary. So kudos for that amazing work. My superintendent's report today is just one item, and it's going to be to discuss with you our funding requirement request for the legislature. I gave you a quick overview last meeting where I said we have 4 funding requirements, and then USIMAC will have one also. But 2 of ours are ongoing for personnel, 2 are for 2 different buildings. The personnel was quick and easy. The first one is going to be baked into the state compensation bill. You can go back, Michelle, to the graph. And that's just our teachers' increase of 4.13%. The second one will be for additional FTEs and then hopefully a bump for our entry-level people, which is so difficult to hire right now. Just this last week, the associates had to make some decisions on bringing certain aides down from Ogden to help in Salt Lake and Springville on their campuses. And but I know we're not the only school district in that situation. They're all struggling right now with paraprofessionals and cafeteria staff and custodial and so forth. So those 2 are what they are. The other 2 are the buildings, and I wanted to give you this quick overview. I asked one of our staff members, who's our graphic artist, to give you a graphic on where we've come from. When I was appointed as the superintendent back in 2013, one of the first things we noticed is that we've got a lot of work to do to provide appropriate facilities for our students that are in our campuses and in our buildings. And so we've really done a lot of great work, and I thought it was interesting to just have a visual overview of, first of all, the OEC, of course, which is our large new building on the Salt Lake campus. It's only 5 years old now. And as I was walking through with some people that came to tour it this week looking for how to accommodate their own deaf and blind people in their own organization, I said, I think it's been like 3 or 4 years. And then we did the math. It was 5 years when that ribbon cutting happened. Major renovations on the other building on our Salt Lake campus, of course, the JMS building. And then Ogden Campus, we've had an ongoing, for those of you that have visited Ogden, our campus is a very large, beautiful campus with big trees. It used to be the site of the State Tuberculosis Hospital back in the day. And some people say it's still haunted because of that. But that is our most intensive campus. The other campuses are fairly low maintenance in comparison. But it needed a lot of updating because at about a 25-year build out rate, this was the time when things start falling apart. It's in great condition and it looks really good now. But that long yellow bar is because we've just done a few projects every year throughout this whole thing. There was no new construction needed there per se. The Springville design and build, of course, took that 4-year period. And then we have an update on the Mill Creek portable. It is on site. It's been set there, and within the next couple of weeks, it will be ready for action. And so our students will be able to move out of the Mill Creek Elementary School, owned by Granite District, where they've been so accommodating to us. And it's a nice new portable. The other one was falling apart. And then the St. George portable saga continues. We are tearing out the entire interior because of mold mitigation. And so that free building, which is costing us $250,000, is still about half the cost of a new one, and so it'll be great when it's done. And that will give us the 4 classrooms, triage classrooms, I call them, in St. George, until we can get a permanent building there. The Salt Lake land purchase, which we'll discuss, St. George design and build, those are those 2. And then one day, we still have in the back of our minds the Outdoor Family Learning Center, and we're still, that's the foundation, kind of looking at that. We're not asking for taxpayer money for that at all. And it's just something that several superintendents and boards before me have asked us to kind of follow through and try to provide that eventually if we can. So we don't have an actual timeline for that, but it's not a critical need at this point. So with that overview, I wanted to go down to the slides, Michelle. These are the slides we'll be presenting to the legislature. This is the one on the teacher increases, which is contained in code. The next one is the slide on the increased funding for personnel so that we can just staff like we need to for our kids. And then the third and fourth slides are here. We have, just so you know, this is not something where Joel said, you know what, I want a building, I want to do this or whatever. We've been actually doing the needs assessment for a while, and we've involved professionals. So we hired on architects to help us do what's called a feasibility study, which is essentially pre-programming work and talking with the associates and our staffing to see where is it that our kids do not have the classrooms they need and the office space for our professionals. So the first one, as you're aware of, we got money last year from the legislature to purchase a piece of land adjacent to our Salt Lake campus for a small high school building. The word small is a little bit maybe disingenuous because nothing is small in cost anymore. And as you saw on the timelines, any state building project has a 3-year minimum lead time on it. And so we've been working with DFCM, and I'm telling them, keep these costs down. We only want to build what we need. And then legislators and our colleagues in Washington County especially are saying, if you have to put a couple extra classrooms in now, it's better than coming back in 2 years and asking then. So we don't want to overbuild, but we don't want to shortchange the needs of the program either. And that's where we're trying to balance this. So this is far beyond my level of expertise, obviously. And so between the architects, the associates who closely monitor their programs, and the state Division of Construction and Facility Management, they have a manager assigned to us. And essentially he's working with the architect to do these space studies for us to see exactly what we need. And when these numbers came back, I'm just like, are you kidding? And he said, oh, this is nothing compared to what higher ed is asking for. And it's the same bucket of money. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll ask. All we can do is ask, but this is legitimately what we're going to need. So right now, the Salt Lake High School building is, it's not, by December, we will have an exact number. It's what they call the CBE, that the State Facilities Department kind of allows us to go to the building board with. And this is where the architect said the number should come out, but it'll be adjusted slightly, probably. And this will provide about 8 or 9 classrooms in Salt Lake, and then also office space. Right now, we're using classrooms, and we've chopped up our gym in the small building on the Salt Lake campus to use for additional classroom space until we can get these. But we have like therapists and others who, we have dividers in the classrooms, so the teachers are teaching in kind of an L-shaped classroom while the therapists do their work in a corner of it. So it will alleviate all that. You can walk into a classroom and it'll be all a classroom for the kids now. The next slide is the Washington County, and this is an awesome project because they are giving us the land and they are going to manage construction services, so there will not be a 10%, 10 to 18% is what I was told yesterday by DFCM. That fee will not be there on this. Washington County, as some of you are aware of, they build so many buildings. They were telling me like in the last 6 years they built like 26 school buildings, and the architect that did 21 of them for them is the one that we hired also to do the feasibility space study. And so he was able to give us this with, there's a certain way they build using tilt-up concrete, and they claim to save about 20 to 25% of their costs on that. So we're going to take advantage of that, and DFCM said they're willing. They said, we don't have to manage this project. We'll still have a manager assigned, but if Washington County is willing to do that, that'll save you that amount of money. And then they gave us the piece of land, which is awesome too, and they're very accommodating. But what they were really helpful with their expertise in just understanding the crazy growth in that southern part of the state. And Kristen, you're probably just smiling, like people just don't even understand if they don't live down there or go there often. And Laura's seen it too. So anyway, this is our November estimate. Before the December, we will have the final numbers that the state has approved and said, this is what we recommend. This is as efficient as we can do it, but also it should meet the needs of USDB for the foreseeable future. And what I mean by foreseeable is like, we're looking for at least the next 20 years. So we don't have to come back and say, hey, we need a couple of extra classrooms and that's always possible, but the two things that really drive up these costs are the long timeline that it takes a state to build a building over 3 years, combined with the current market that we have right now, which you know is escalating rapidly with inflation. So I'm depending on all of those experts to give us the numbers. That's my report. So I also wanted to mention, I don't think we need an approval of anything today because it's not a final number, but we just wanted to keep you aware as we're developing these IFRs. Superintendent Tanner has one more topic.
We have a question for you first.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I can wait, Madam Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
Mine shifts a little bit off of this, so that's why I thought maybe you want to ask your question first. It's about the ESSERS funds we need to request or talk about that we're going to be requesting.
Okay, we'll do that after this.
Right, that's what I thought.
Okay, go ahead, Chair Huntsman.
Well, is his report final?
He's finished.
We're at the tail end of this. Okay. Thank you. It's been nice having you chair, by the way. It's, to be over here. I just have, if I could, I'd like to go back to their annual report. We had 0 comments, and I thought, there's an injustice here, because there's not an executive summary. And then I just want to recognize your work. It's done very well. There's been some evolution and streamlining this, but it takes a lot of work to take a pause moment with everything that's going on and look back to see where you've been, and especially with the programs and activities. And then it's like, okay, academic performance is built in there, and then of course your financial report. But I want to thank you for your awesomeness in putting this together and packaging it this way. It is a lot of work, but I know from doing reports myself that pause moment gives you a little time to reflect and put this together, and it helps your trajectory of where you're going to go next. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to your next one with everything that's on the horizon. And so I wish there was a way we could put in some kind of executive summary in this report, which is a kind of a summary of things and where we could go, but we can talk about that later. But thank you for all your work and effort. It was a really good read and a really good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. Board Member Booth?
I just wanted to comment on the both the report and the funding requirements, the presentation of the funding requirements. It was in the middle of hundreds of pages of read. This was very accessible, and it just, I get it. Impact, if not fun. It was just so clear. I thought, man, I wish we could, and maybe it's just my simplistic approach. You've streamlined it in a way so that I can really grab it and understand clearly how critical this is for these students. And I just want to compliment you on the job that you're all doing in representing a group of students, not unlike many other groups of students around the state who need desperately representation from committed educators. And I fully sense your commitment to them, and I'm getting it. And I believe that the legislature will also get it in the presentations that you're preparing. I echo what Chair Huntsman is saying in terms of an executive summary at the beginning, because, you know, when I looked at it and saw how many pages, I thought, oh, I'm not going to read this. But I started, and it was kind of like, then I was hooked. I couldn't not continue to read because of the way you've presented it. And you're right, some of those pictures are, you know, speak 1,000 words. And so I'm grateful for the great work, and I'm so happy as a member of this governing board to see these students blossoming month by month as we receive reports and as we can look now at a full year and at what is needed to move forward in the very proactive, positive way that you have been moving. It just feels good to know that you're attending to business, and want to just express thanks on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Board Member Booth.
Thank you.
Superintendent, did you have something else?
No, ma'am, but apparently Superintendent Tanner reminded me of something that I should have had also. Michelle, do you just want to take it from
Yeah,
here?
just to briefly. So we were offered the opportunity, as is all the school districts were, to take advantage of ESSER funds. And since we wanted to leave that on for other people that may have needed, we didn't touch it. But we were allotted, I believe it was 190,750. And we didn't take it at first. Well, as we've gone through this year, as many of you may have probably also experienced as well, but it hits dramatically for our students who don't have the ability to communicate with other people. But the mental health of our student needs has gone up significantly. This year, after they've come back from just all that's been happening in the world and with COVID, our school counselors are overwhelmed with the needs that the children are having. And we love these kids. We want to see them thrive. And there isn't another avenue even for them to even seek counseling with sometimes, because you have to go through an interpreter, and it's not the same. It's just not the same to talk to someone directly about your concerns and needs, and obviously the things that impact in school. So we were just letting you know we would like to seek out some of the ESSER funds, and Sarah Young is here if you have any questions of her, but they have allowed us to extend to ask for that position. So we're going to put forward an ask for that position specifically for a school counselor. With that said, I hope and pray I find one, because we have to have not only a school counselor, which is like finding a very difficult position, but I need someone that can sign directly and communicate fluently, not just sign, but can sign with the students. And so that may be a little hard ask, but I need to make sure I have funding before I go forward with that. So just wanted to make you aware that that's a need we're seeing and we're trying to address, and we're going to take advantage of some ESSER funds. If you have any questions.
Thank you.
For me, or
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's all for my report.
Is that complete, your report?
It does, thank you.
I don't see any other questions, so we will take a break, but I want you to know I will start at 10 after, board members, so rush.